Well, I know this is going to be an unusual sight for Grail Country audiences. Nate on camera all by his lonesome with no guests. It's not something that I normally do. Uh, but Sherry was hit by the inclement weather uh, and had to delay her family Christmas dinner. And everyone's busy with their Christmas plans. But I promised a live stream in celebration of Grail Country reaching 1,000 subscribers, which isn't a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but it's certainly more than I ever expected. Um, Sometimes I feel like this channel is very is very self-indulgent because I just kind of like talk to the people I would want to talk to about the things I would want to talk about. If nobody were watching, I'm glad that some of you choose to watch us and watch us on a regular basis and follow the channel and support the channel, and I appreciate it. You can see that I'm wearing a Grail Country hoodie today. I don't know if people express an interest, I might follow through with my sister who made it for me, and we could look at making it available to purchase. But this was given to me by my sister who designed the logo for Grail Country as a Christmas gift. So I'm wearing that today. As I said, I have no particular topic in mind. It's just really, I just wanted to thank everyone who has been following the channel for the past year or so and what we're doing. I want to thank Michael, who Grail Country audience will know as a regular, especially in the early days. Oh, my mom's watching. Hey, Mom. How's it going? So I just wanted to thank everyone who's been following the channel for us hitting that 1,000 subscriber milestone. And that's really it. If anyone happens to show up and wants something that they has something they want to talk about, or feel free to click on the link that's in the chat. Let me actually go ahead and let's see if I can. I'll pin it. So that's the link if you want to join in. It's open. It's open topic, open stream. If you have anything you want to talk about. Oh, looks like. Hey, it's Laura. Welcome. Laura is the face that you might all recognize. She's talked to me a few times now on Grail Country. I hope you had a Merry Christmas, Laura.
Yeah, I did. Can you hear me?
I actually can hear you, yes.
Great. I'm using a different headset from usual. Yeah, okay. I had a wonderful Christmas. How was yours?
Very good, very good. I've got this sweatshirt from my sister who designed the logo. It's a Grail Country sweatshirt.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's it was lovely. I made our main family gathering was on Christmas Eve, and I made a 4-course Italian dinner. There was a 5th-course dessert, which was not made by me. My stepdaughter made a ricotta pie, and my sister Liz made a Sicilian orange cake.
Wow.
I made the other courses. There was a vegan option for every course. Even though it was Christmas Eve, there was still a meat course because I have people who don't eat seafood and don't like vegan food. So I did have a stricotta that was served with ziti for the people who really wanted to have their meat.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, does your family have a tradition of eating vegetarian meals on Christmas Eve?
Well, I have vegetarian family members. I have like my sister Elizabeth and her family. They're all vegan. Also, her husband Chris, he eats vegan most of the time because it's easiest for the family. But he does eat fish, so he was like really stoked to, because I had one of the appetizers was clams casino, and then I had cioppino for one of the courses, so he was like very excited. I made sure he got a nice big Dungeness crab
Yeah,
That shit
but
wasn't his goal.
in a lot of cultures, isn't it traditional to eat a vegetarian or seafood meal?
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, the Italian Christmas Eve meal is Feast of the Seven Fishes.
Okay, yeah.
So it's traditionally all seafood. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so a lot of the dishes for the menu that I came up with were seafood, but I had meat courses for the people that just had to have their meat.
Yeah.
I actually kind of let it serve multiple purposes too, because I had made what we had made. No, I didn't cook them. I trimmed the brisket. We bought 2 full packer briskets, and we used the flats for Hanukkah parties earlier in the week, and I reserved the point for the striccata that I made for Christmas Eve. So
good planning. I love brisket. Yeah. Yeah. So my family never had a tradition of having any particular menu on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, mine either. Not growing up. That's just it's a thing that I've done. I've done this before. I did back in the early 2000s. I actually did like an all vegan Vietnamese menu because like most of our guests were vegan that year, because I have a fair amount of vegans in my family, because I live in Washington State and we're a bunch of coffee drinking hippies, right. Weed smoking coffee drinking hippies, and a lot of us are vegan. So
was there any weed at your Christmas Eve?
No,
is that one of the courses?
No weed, no weed. No, we did have, it was still Hanukkah though, so we did have we let my my little 7-year-old niece got to light the Hanukkah, because we didn't give equal time, but we at least set aside a portion of the evening to let the Jewish portion of my household celebrate Hanukkah too.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah.
So I was inordinately excited about this. I saw you announce it on Twitter, and I was kind of hoping maybe all your regulars were going to appear, and I think
everybody's still, yeah, that's what I kind of hope too. But I mean, I think people are still holiday hangover. I'm glad the people who are here. So looks like there's a few people popping into the stream, but I promised I was going to do it, so I'm gonna follow through and do it.
All right, well,
I thought I might actually, like, I was prepared to be nobody here, and I was kind of cleaning up my office a little bit today, and I found, like, among other things, I found like a menu that I had come up with when I was a chef, dreaming of having my own place, and then a bunch of old poems. And I was like, oh, I'll just read this stuff if I have nothing else to do. Can you hear me, Laura? Laura, did you lose me? Sounds like. Hello?
So you're not coming through well on my end.
Oh, weird. I don't know. Let me check my settings here. Hold on a second. Okay, so my mic shows working, and I can hear you, so I'm not sure.
I wonder if I could refresh my page.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, okay, let's see.
Do you think
I'll refresh the StreamYard page and see what happens.
Anyway, I was just talking about how I've like gone through and like sorted through some papers in my office and was afraid that
I can hear you a little more now.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, so I had just been saying that I was afraid. Oh, we lost Laura. Okay, I am by myself, so maybe I will have to just start randomly reading stuff that I found in my office. Okay, nope, Laura's coming back to save me. Let me get my mouse to the right screen. Okay. All right.
Okay, fine. I'll try again. Hey, it's me. I don't know if the problem was my internet or
what I was saying is, like, I had like literally no plan for this whatsoever, because it's just like, hey, thank you. We hit 1,000 subscribers. And I wanted to keep it open in case people showed up and had something that they wanted to talk about. And then I had cleaned out some paperwork in my office earlier today, and I found a bunch of really old stuff. And it's like, if push came to shove, I was just going to start reading like the old poems that I found, and maybe share, like, there's a menu that I found from when I was still working as a sous chef and daydreaming about having my own restaurant. where I like came up with a
So
menu.
you're just gonna read a menu. Awesome. So, well, what's been on your mind lately? I'll talk about anything you want to talk about.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I'm just like today I'm just feeling very, very grateful. I think I don't really, let's see, what am I? Oh, I guess what I'm thinking about right now is I'm trying to thinking about. I just got a direct message from Burn Power on Twitter, and he's asked me to record a 1 to 5 minute video for his like end of year. So now I got to meditate on like what I want to say about 2022 as a year.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I don't want to just do it off the cuff. I actually like want to meditate on it and see like how I would think about it. But I don't mind thinking out loud about it. I can think out loud about it a little bit now. So,
sure, go ahead. 2022.
So I don't know. Does 2022 does 2022 feel different to you than the let's say the two immediate previous years, which were definitely like COVID years? Was there anything different about this year?
It's a little hard for me to say because I started doing something new this year because I got a new job in September.
Okay.
So that changed the year for me. But the fact that I was very preoccupied with a change in my life might keep me from seeing larger trends.
Okay.
I'm trying to think like how does the internet feel in 2022?
Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk buying Twitter changed the mood on Twitter in some ways. Towards the end of 2022, obviously.
Do you think that, like, if he gives up being CEO, do you think that's gonna, like, it looks like he's going to? Does that, you think that's gonna change that, or?
It'll change something, but in what direction? I don't know. Yeah. I'm very interested to see what happens with Twitter, but I don't know what to make of Elon. Smart to say about it.
I don't know what to make of Elon.
I mean, I guess I don't really either.
I'm not really strongly in either the Elon is the greatest or the Elon is the devil camp. So I'm really open on,
right.
I don't know. Here's my thing about Elon is, like, for the most part, he seems okay to me. I don't get the hyperbolic overreaction to him from people that think he's the worst thing ever. I don't get that. But at the same time, like, he's the Neuralink guy.
Right, exactly. So I'm kind of intrigued,
which is concerning to me.
I'm kind of intrigued by him. He amuses me sometimes. There are some things about him that seem pretty cool. But when I hear him talking to people about how we're going to have to merge with machines.
He literally wants us to be the Borg, people. Like,
right, exactly.
Maybe have a little bit of caution.
No. That's the thing. That's the thing I've been most scared of for my entire life. Right.
Right.
So I can't just be an Elon fangirl for that reason.
Okay, so I think we have a topic now. Let's talk about this. This should be interesting. What is worse? What is worse, a world where general artificial intelligence becomes a reality, or a world in which, out of fear of the emergence of general artificial intelligence, we decide to merge with our machines in order to maintain control? Which is actually the darker timeline?
Well, the second one is the classic story of becoming the thing that you fear. Right? You see something that is scary to you. It's some other group of people, right? Usually, and you think that you have to become as bad as them in order to fight them, right? And so you do, and before you know it, you're basically the same as them.
Yeah, that came up in my recent conversation with Michael Martin and Matthew Milliner on Meditations on the Tarot, where they were talking about, like, that's why, like, little kids will, like, pretend to be the bad guy.
I watched that one. It's the one about the chapter on the devil. That was an excellent video. And Michael Martin and what's the other one? Michael Milliner?
Matthew Milliner.
Matthew Milliner.
Milliner.
No, they were both great. And Matthew Milliner, that was the first time I'd seen him on anything. He was very insightful. I liked him a lot.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's great. I had him on earlier, about a month and a half, 2 months ago, to talk about his book on the history of the icon of Our Lady of Sorrows. And Mother of the Lamb is the name of the book. It's a great book.
So which is worse? To get back to that original topic, I think the second one's worse because in the first one, the scenario I can imagine is you have an AI that is like the oppressive ruler of the world, but all the people are still people.
Yeah.
And they could throw off the shackles of that oppressive rule in some way at some point when the time is right. But in the second scenario, they lose themselves, right? So then I don't know how you get out of that.
Well, yeah, that's right. And in some way, it's like at that point, it's like, to me, it seems like you've given up the world of creation entirely.
Yeah.
And exchanged it for another world.
Yeah.
Which seems to me to be the more diabolical path.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So it seems like there because you might be oppressed, but in one scenario you might be oppressed and things might be dark, but you're still human. And in the other scenario, you're not really human anymore.
Yeah.
You're something else. But
right, that's definitely the worst option.
But I don't know, but like,
yeah,
would we still be human? I think John Vervaeke would argue yes, right? Because we've always used it, because he talks about psychotechnology. So like something like Neuralink would just be like an extreme development of psychotechnology.
Yeah.
Which is something we've always done.
Give me an example.
Well, I would, okay. Maybe I'm just in a weird mood. I think psychedelics are a good example of a psychotechnology that's really ancient.
Okay. Yeah.
But there are lots of like
arts,
but really, I mean, it's just any kind of technology that like extends our mental capacity.
Well, yes, so, I think a lot about.
Is it really is a Neuralink that different? That much different from this?
Well, right. That's
right.
Yeah, I know.
Or is it just a technological improvement of this?
I feel like that you're getting close to the Neuralink, but you're still you're still in a situation where you can put the thing down and walk away from it, and it's
or
not
at least theoretically, although it's engineered to make it as hard for you as possible.
I know, but then what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, writing, right? So I think a lot about literacy because I was really fascinated by Walter J. Ong's book, Orality and Literacy. Have you ever read that?
Mm-mm.
Oh, that's a really good book. But it explains a lot about just how much reading and writing changes people, right? It changes the way we think. It changes the way we talk and the kinds of ideas we have. So,
well, yeah, that would be another example of the same kind of right. Like there was a time when we didn't have writing, right? And then so writing is also, it's a psychotechnology. It's an ability that extends and it kind of, what it does is it allows us to project ourselves further into the future and also connects us back further to the past. It actually is a way of transcending our temporality to a limited degree.
Definitely, because in a purely oral culture, you can make things disappear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can make the knowledge of past events disappear if everyone chooses not to talk about them.
But here's the weird thing, Laura, is that it turns out that oral culture is so much more robust than we ever thought it was, though.
Well, yes, but if
like fairy tales are way older than anything we have written in a book. Like,
but I mean, if people in a community decide not to pass on certain information,
right,
it's gone.
Right.
Because it's not written down anywhere.
So maybe it is the orality maybe better at filtering out what's unimportant? Well, maybe that's the problem, is that we have too much to sort through. Yeah. Because we're able to keep everything, right? So
that's a problem with modern history, historiography, I guess, right? Modern history studies is that there's a ton of information just sitting around in archives that everyone's got to comb through. And when you try to get a fix on what happened in a certain historical event, you get overwhelmed with all the details. Whereas there are other cultures where history is lore, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a zillion details.
Which which kind of makes you think about the when in doubt, print the legend in a different light, right? Because there's actually something to that, because the folkloric and the legendary is in some ways it's acting as a form of data compression. So it may not be as truthful or factual as history. It is conveying at least the most narratively salient bits in a way that captures the imagination.
Yes. And it gets you into all these questions of like, what is it that we actually need to know? Mm-hmm. Right. We don't often stop to ask ourselves that. So, because I think we kind of assume that we're all supposed to know everything, or ideally we would all know everything, right? Everything being all the little details of everything that ever happened, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what an AI is going to know.
That's right.
And I don't think that's going to help anybody.
This is exactly right, because it's just going to be, it's going to be a bunch of like aggregate quantitative stuff. I don't see how, well, I mean, if any qualitative information input it has is going to have to come from human beings. It won't be able to have any on its own. But the thing is like, is there going to be any meaning in that if it's taken from from an aggregate as opposed to from an individual human subjective experience? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, people are excited about AI in part because they have this idea that the good kind of knowledge is the kind where you just amass a ton of facts,
right?
And you become capable of analyzing data highly accurately with all these little details. And then you can make all the right decisions because you really, really know like all the things, you know, like all the little data points, all the little facts. Can you still hear me? Is my connection okay? Yeah. So, hello.
Thanks, James.
Yeah. And then they have this, in my view, mistaken expectation that if you have an AI system that can really know all the facts and put them together and analyze all the data and show you all the graphs and include everything, right, every little information point, it's finally going to have what we've all been aiming for all this time in our own educations. It's actually going to achieve the knowing everything. And then they think, well, if it knows all the details, it's going to make all the right decisions.
Right, and it's entirely based on the assumption that knowledge is information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the faster way of saying what I was trying to say.
But that's it. I mean, it's like it's entirely dependent upon the knowledge is information paradigm. But it's like, but I'm not remotely convinced that that's the right view of what knowledge is.
Right, and it's a kind of knowledge, but it's not the knowledge that most people really need most of the time.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's even a kind of knowledge.
I mean, it is a kind of knowledge.
I'll say this.
Like, I would say, ask somebody like, is this an oak tree or an ash tree? You know, they may or may not know what kind of tree it is, and it might be of use to them to know what kind of tree it is. That's right. Knowledge as information, right?
But do you know anything about the oak or the ash tree or what it's I mean, you don't know anything about the thing itself from that kind of knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But yeah. So with regard to knowing what kind of tree a tree is, explain to me a better way of knowing that
well, I think the most meaningful kind of, if you break apart knowledge of information, even the most meaningful kind of knowledge is information. It turns out not to be knowledge of information. Let's use your oak and ash tree example, right? Okay, just like being able to recognize an oak tree from an ash tree on its own isn't particularly useful. But if you know, like, it might be more useful to you if you were to know, say, like, what that difference meant. So I like, if you know, like, if you've had a relationship with oak and ash trees, you would know from burning them in your fire, for example, that the oak tree is going to give you a log that burns longer on your fire than the ash tree will. But the ash tree is very dense and light, and might be very good for making things like axe handles. But you can't know that it's not the kind of thing you can know just from a book. You have to know it by interacting with the world experientially. Anything really worth knowing ends up being relational in the end, including even something as fundamentally that seems as even something that seems as fundamentally quantitative, like mathematics. Mathematics is ultimately an abstract expression of relationship.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
right. So
you're thinking knowing which tree is which is in your scenario kind of just like telling the difference between different people and knowing who they are.
Yeah. Right.
Which is again not a thing you learn from a book. It's something you just learn.
Right. Well, yeah. If I can tell Laura's face from Sherry's face, that's okay. It's not a bad thing. But I might. It's what's more useful is to understand that Laura is this person, and Laura has these interests and likes to talk about these things, and this is the way that Laura relates to the world, and this is how Laura likes to be talking. Like, it's not going to be the same as it is with Sherry. There's more specific ways. I mean, I think ultimately we know everything in the way we know persons. I just think that persons are more complicated, and that we never come to the end of knowing them. But the proper way of knowing anything is going to be by entering into that kind of deep relationship with it. That's why we learn the stuff that we're passionate about so much faster.
Yes.
And the stuff that the things that we're doing something with, where it's like, I'm not just learning this because it's some facts I have to memorize. I'm learning this because I can do something with this that improves my life and improves the lives of other people.
Yes.
So I say this as somebody who, by the way, was always gifted with trivia, which is now the most useless, which is now even more. It was always useless, but it's now more useless than ever.
Yeah, no, I was always a trivia person too. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about what education is for and what we should be doing in schools. It's a difficult question.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. This is good. Let's go there. Think about that. What is education for, Laura? Tell me.
Right. Well, and is its purpose always the same, or do you need to look around you at what's happening now and adjust what you think the purpose of education is to whatever the current circumstances are? That's
right. And does someone who's going to be a blacksmith or a plumber need the same education as someone who's going to be a college professor?
Yeah, and I wonder if with the way the world is now, maybe a lot of what we need to be doing in schools is guiding students in how to direct their attention and how to protect it.
Right, because we're so inundated with information more than ever. And that's all this advancement of these various technologies, from writing to the computer to the internet to artificial intelligence, all that it represents is an explosion of knowledge that isn't really knowledge.
Yeah.
Because it takes human beings to be able to take those things and do something with them still. Although maybe, I don't know. I'm sure an AI expert could come in here and tell me why AI is able to do that and how AI is able to do that.
Well, I've worked with machine translators a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I have thoughts on what their strengths and weaknesses are and why. But yeah, with regard to education, it's really difficult. I kind of wish somebody else would jump in here, actually.
Yeah, this is definitely open. I saw James and Lance poking around. Anyone? My mom's hanging around. Bob, you can come onto the stream and sing us a song.
Aw.
My mom has a great voice. My mom, Anime Tie Dye, there in the chat. She has her own little YouTube channel where she posts some of her songs. She writes original songs and does covers.
Well, that sounds really
she's
nice.
filled my life with song. She's a good mom.
Lovely.
But anyone really?
Yeah, but so what specifically, right? Like I have this. Oh yeah.
No, go ahead. I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're breaking up a once in a while. Still. Okay, so yeah, so I look at these students that I'm working with, and I just think like, what should we be doing with these kids? Like, we're doing a pretty good job within the current model of what education is for, but I just have this feeling that that we should be doing something a little different, that something else would be better. But then how exactly to determine what the something else is and how to put it into action, right? That's the difficult. The systems get stuck on things because it's so hard to figure out how to change things.
I think, don't you think the open-endedness of our model is part of the problem, where it's like we tell kids you can be anything, you can do anything. It's like that, maybe that like is, and we don't act, and we have no idea of what kind of person we're trying to produce.
That's true. Like some more cultural, moral, social training that is a bit less open would be good. I'm very tired of the be yourself message that is still all over the place, you know? I notice still, like in all kinds of schools, I don't know, like just walk into any school, you'll see these posters exhorting people to be themselves. And that's not a new thing. Those have been around since like the 80s, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But that's too vague and too open-ended, right?
Yeah,
like
it ends up producing
right?
relatively smart people who work mid-level jobs for the state and talk about stuff that interests them on YouTube instead of doing something more productive in society. So
I'd like to give people a little more guidance in like what, in what's a good man and a good woman in society.
Mm-hmm.
How should we interact with each other? Like give them like some more specifics and do it in an embodied way.
Well, I don't think you can do that's, but I think you just hit the nail on the head. I don't think you cannot disconnect it from virtue. Like you have to have some notion of virtue in order to provide an education that is an education.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, sure. But, religious schools can do that. So.
Right. But like any schools should.
Well, and also, the secular schools actually are trying to do that because they don't understand that they have a religion.
Well, I think the secular schools were able to do that in the past because there was enough of a shared idea of what virtue was, even in secular society, that was possible, and it seems like that has slipped away.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is, I think we talk more about values now than virtue.
Yeah.
And values are kind of, it's interesting that we chose a market term, right?
You're right. Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, it really is. It's kind of like, and it's sort of empty in that too, because like, well, what's valued? Like, well, whatever we decided is valued. That's what's valued. Like, there's nothing that's valued for its own sake.
Yeah, right.
So there's we have no notion of the good as such. We have no notion of any of the transcendentals anymore guiding our notion of virtue.
Yeah, so the public schools in my area, and probably pretty much everywhere, it seems to me that their number one value is inclusivity. But then the question is, well, what are you including people in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have something you think is good, and you want to include people in it because the thing you're doing is good? And if so, what is the thing and what's good about it?
You know, Laura, though, even the inclusivity, like, we do it really bad. Because we know, I'm serious, because we still do it operating from the same Western paradigm that the academics who came up with these ideas are critiquing, right? So it's like, no, if you're really serious about like wanting to value perspectives other than the Western perspective, then why don't you actually start teaching kids other ways of thinking other than the Western way of thinking?
Yeah.
And see because you're not doing that.
Right.
You're not, everything is still presented as a propositional tyranny.
Yeah.
It's just a different propositional tyranny.
Yeah, good point. Yes.
So I have on that note, Shane Fenwick, who was on the channel a while back, we had a conversation about Christianity and psychedelics. He lives in Australia, and he has some interaction with Australian Aboriginal tribes. And there's a book that he recommended on kind of like trying to dialogue between the Australian Aboriginal traditions and Christianity. So I'm going to read that book, and we're going to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I read Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta because it was mentioned on Rebel Wisdom once. They interviewed him. Have you seen that book?
No, talk about it. I'm interested.
You know, it's been a while since I read it. It was maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago that I read it. So I only remember it dimly. What should I say about it? I'm not sure. I'd have to think about what I would want to say about it.
That's okay. I will say this. Yeah. Let me say this. I would say I'm going to talk about it in Barfieldian terms as to what I think is going on here.
Okay.
Because what is evident to me is that it's the withdrawal of participation is a Western phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
That has
define Western.
Western meaning North American, European, really North American and European.
Give me a time frame. Like since
I would
when?
say post Middle Ages.
Okay.
From the early modern period forward. Like I would say that there was that the Middle Ages was, well, really, okay, so you have the beginnings of withdrawal start in the Axial Age, really, but you still have a more participatory culture in the Middle Ages.
For sure.
So it's really post medieval European culture.
Okay.
Is what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Which includes North
America.
America.
Also post medieval European elite culture.
Yes, right? It does.
Because it took a long time for there to be public schooling and such like that. Caught all the non-elite people and brought them into this way of thinking.
The point is it's a culture that's defined by forefronting abstract thinking at the top of everything. Like, so this is like abstract discursive reasoning is the most valued thing. Mm-hmm. And it tends to create a notion of knowledge as information, and also to create these sort of propositional tyrannies.
Yes.
And it's disconnected from deeper ways of knowing.
Yep.
And those deeper ways of knowing are really real. And we don't ever lose touch with them entirely, which is why John Vervaeke can talk about them, right? Mm-hmm. In his research. So Although he would just characterize them as other ways of knowing. I'm going to say deeper ways of knowing because I think there's a spiritual dimension to this, particularly when it comes to participation, and that other cultures were not were not necessarily subject to that, or became subject to that later, and are still closer to a participatory mindset, which isn't to say they're better. I want to make that very clear, which isn't to say they're better. It's to say that they're different, and that they do have access to things that we have kind of lost because of that, because of our emphasis.
Yes. No,
but that's not what goes on. But here's the thing. It's like trying to connect to actual other ways of knowing that we could learn from other cultures to have a better and more holistic knowledge in the West is not what we do in our educational system.
Right.
We just basically beat each other up about being evil Westerners, and we just
we learn a kind of,
and we just think everything is we think everything foreign is good by virtue of being foreign, rather than actually looking at it and evaluating it on its merits.
Yes.
Right. So, because I mean, one of the ways that Barfield described original participation, he says it simply is paganism. Well, that means that probably a wholesale embrace of it in the Christian West is probably not a good idea. And there is a reason why final participation has to pass through modernity, which simply is the withdrawal of participation at its apex, and that it needs to rediscover participation through that. And there's no actual return to original participation that's available.
Yeah, I like that.
But we can't shut out.
The only way out is through.
Right, but we can't shut out that knowledge entirely, which is what we do. Like, I don't see anybody who's not doing. Very few people who aren't doing that, except for maybe Chloe Valderay.
Oh, I love her.
I know, she's amazing. No, she's like she's a genius. She really is, and her work is amazing. And if she ever wants to come on Girl Country, she's very welcome.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
So I was trying to promote her in my area as somebody who could actually accomplish the goals that the people who were trying to implement DEI measures claimed they wanted to accomplish, right? And I kept trying to convince people she can actually do what it is
because she's rooted in love and participation, and not just like, I want to make a different propositional tyranny to fight against your propositional tyranny.
Yeah, but people just wouldn't buy it. Yeah. Anyway, hi, Lance.
Hey, guys. Congratulations on 1K, Nate.
Yeah. I'm surprised I got there, honestly. Like, I really, really seriously thought we'd have I thought maybe we'd hit 200 peak. I thought that what we talk about is just too niche and not of interest enough to enough people. But I'm really glad that there's enough of you weirdos out there to join us in our weirdness.
But I don't think what you talk about is niche at all. What you talk about is like everything in a way.
That's true. That's kind of true.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, if there's one thing this little corner has shown us, is there are a lot more weird people like us out in the world, all over the globe.
Yeah, that's true. How was your Christmas, Lance?
It was great. My boys are usually off running around, traveling the globe around Christmas, but they were here yesterday, so they wanted Dad's traditional holiday fixins, so I did that, and we have more.
What'd you make?
It's very traditional, but that's what they wanted.
Traditional's good.
Honey baked ham, and I know you were doing that yesterday, and green bean casserole, that classic Midwestern American hot dish, and stuffing.
Oh, did you make hot dish?
Yep, and then
my goodness, my son loves hot dish.
Texas potatoes and all that stuff.
That sounds good.
Very good. Yeah, I had to my son insisted. I just wanted to have the leftovers from Christmas Eve, but my son he really, really, really looks forward to ham. So I had to make the ham for him. I don't use honey. I use brown sugar, butter, Grand Marnier and marmalade.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
But it's sweet and ham. Same
I
idea.
want to come to your house sometime, Nate.
Well, I heard you guys talking about education, and one of the things I'm really starting to see, my aunt did this. She had either 8 or 9 kids, but ended up doing homeschooling, and in seeing what her children have kind of grown up to become.
Mm-hmm.
And I like A River Runs Through It is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that movie. It speaks to me about a lot of themes, but also people who struggle with addictions or problems and what that means in a family and what that says about them. I love all that about that. But, I think the industrialized teaching us to become good clock punctures for 8 hours a day, right, to prepare us for manufacturing jobs and things and the memorization of facts, like you guys talked about trivia. Like I've been thinking for a long time, particularly where we're at right now, is how poorly we really do educate our children. And I thought about, and I'm old enough, I'm going to be 53 here soon, but we read all the classics like in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We were exposed to, like, I hated Jane Eyre, but of course you had to read that. But then I'm reading things like Catcher in the. Who cares what you think about
Jane?
these
I don't.
books?
If there's a boy who says that they love Jane Eyre, they're
I
lying.
loved Jane
They're
Eyre
lying.
so much. When I was about 13, I read Jane Eyre, and it made a huge impression on me.
Yeah, every woman that I've ever known with literary bent loves that novel. It's not.
I'll just say I haven't read it since I was 13, so I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how much I like it now. But when I was 13, I was carried.
When I was 13, I was reading A Steady Diet of Robert E. Howard.
I don't even know what it is.
And I had a teacher in the 3rd grade, Mrs. Poor. She didn't like me very much, but I remember her talking like about free speech. And she mentioned that, so this is a Depression area. She grew up in the Depression, teacher, and was talking about people need to be able to say the most vile things, because even if that person can't say it, no one can say anything. Mm-hmm. And I just think about the education I had, but here was the problem with my public school education. It was very much multiple choice memorization of facts. And for me, it wasn't really till I got to law school where there is no memorization of facts. It's all essay driven, one test for all your grade, having to think and critically put things together. And, I really think that reading, writing, and like going back to the thing about my aunt was she would have them do school type things in the morning, but in the afternoons, whatever their passion was is what they got to pursue. So I had one of my cousins knew he wanted to be a missionary at a young age, so he studied foreign languages. Another one of my cousins was really into music, so he practiced his instrument and did things like that. Another cousin was really, her child was really into art, and so she spent the afternoon drawing and pursuing those things. I just feel like a more creative, open, thinking, exploring education just seems to make a heck of a lot more sense. And I see that in some of these Montessori schools and some of these charter schools that you see pop up in cities. And I know this is a big dream, but why couldn't we do something more like that?
Well, here's the thing. It's like, I would say that in order to actually educate a child, the educator has to know a child. So if you have a classroom of 30 students, there's zero chance that you know all of your kids in the kind of way that you need to in order to properly educate them. Because Lance, I think what you said about being able to have time and space for each child to pursue what they naturally love is an important part of it. And then there's the kinds of things that like everyone needs to know in order to be like, a functional adult in the society. But I don't think we even have any consensus on that though.
Right. Yeah. Things you need to know to be a functional adult. That's another difficult question, because I get the sense lately that a lot of our systems are too complex for us to manage anymore. And there actually isn't like a list of things you can know that will make you reliable at successfully managing those systems, right? Because there's too much.
I remember reading an article recently about how like Gen Z folks in the workforce like feel a lot of pressure when it comes to technology because people expect them to know it because of their youth, which is funny. It's, you know, I actually find that in any workplace I've ever been in, the people that you actually want to go to if you're having any kind of technical problem are nerds that are Gen Xers. Not any Gen Xer, but a Gen Xer who is nerdy.
Yeah.
That's the person you want to talk to because
that makes sense.
They came up when computers were arcane and not easy to use and not for everybody, and have used them and loved them their whole lives, and have usually been connected to technology fairly deeply for most of their lives. So that's really who you want to. The Gen Z kids, it's like, yeah, maybe if you want to know how to download the latest app on your smartphone, maybe. But if you have any kind of real problem, they're not it's not what you want to go to.
How to scroll through TikTok.
One thing I noticed about Gen Z kids is they're not as good as you might expect at doing Google searches.
Right.
In a useful environment. What they want to do is type their entire question into Google, and then they hope that one of those little drop-down answer bars will appear in the search results that'll give them a complete answer to the question that they typed the whole of into the search bar. And if they can't get that, it's actually kind of hard for them to figure out how to piece together an answer from looking at lots of different things.
You know, that's actually interesting that you bring that up, Laura, because it's surprising, like something that's as seemingly simple as like doing a Google search. It is surprising like how different the skill levels people can have at something that seems that straightforward. It's some people just have no idea how to conduct good searches. Mm-hmm. That's something I've always been very good at, and it's actually part of my job is actually like conducting discovery searches. So I have to actually think about how to conduct searches to logically get the most salient results.
That's your law background. That's your law background, Nate, because you have to with LexisNexis or the sorts of things.
I have no formal legal training. I learned it all on the job, my friend.
Which actually the dirty little secret for all lawyers. So do we. I mean, you learn it. You know, I actually think of all the things between CPA and everything else. I do think that law school best prepared me for the type of work I did when I started day one. But you get trained how to be a lawyer once you start there. Yeah. But I want to circle back to one thing you guys were talking about, and the reason why I dropped in, I think Laura, I think maybe you mentioned it, was this idea around virtues, right? I've been spending a lot of time with Evagrius Ponticus, who's kind of one of the chief monastics, and you know, basically his whole thing is
controversial one, by the way.
Exactly. Yes. And by the way, he shouldn't have been controversial, but whatever.
I'm with you.
But really, the whole of life he talks about is it's the practice of the gospel virtues, as he called them. And then that leads to the gnosis, the knowledge of God, which is it's a given sort of a thing. And he talked about what the goal of a spiritual father or a teacher is to lead someone from vice to virtue. And I do think virtues are important. And I think that's a lot of, like in AA, people will say to thine own self be true, as Jess and Sherry are talking about. Job had an integrity in himself that he continued to want to ask the questions and push forward. And I do think that the whole that focus on virtue is so important, but yet we're living in a time now where virtues are being assigned and virtue signaling, and what is virtuous is to fit in with the crowd of whatever seems to be the spirit that we're living in now, that predominant spirit. And so virtue's been captured by this kind of autocratic, technocratic people that are saying that. And so we've lost what virtue is. But I think virtue, and that goes back to your point, Nate, about like that mother knew her children, so she let them do that thing that she knew they needed to do. But how do we help people? And here's where virtues will help you out. Instead of plugging in an answer into Chat GPT and getting the paper you need to turn in for the grade, The virtue is actually studying the thing to learn something, right? That's the virtue, is don't just try and get the grade. Try and learn something. And so that's a virtue. Like learning is a virtue. Desiring to actually learn is a virtue. So I don't know how do we do virtue in today's day and age?
Well, Lance, you actually just, I don't know if you intended to or not, but you actually just gave a defense of the kind of the old school techniques of rote memorization, because there is a virtue that is transmitted when you do those things. You learn the value of perseverance, and you get to learn something about your own limits, right?
Well, actually, that speaks to a
and then
bit.
it's and although it's a pain,
prayer, liturgical prayer is that act, but it gives me, see, for me, that's one of the things that, whatever reason it seems repetitive, that has led me to more in-depth learnings and seeings by practicing liturgical prayer over the past year and a half than any other religious thing I've done.
Yeah, that's kind of a mental version of something like practicing free throws, right? The idea when you do anything that is like based on that kind of like rote memorization is to just make it completely second nature to you. And here's the thing is, like, once it's become second nature to you, then it actually changes your relationship to it. So yeah, you are able to kind of do it without thinking, but that's kind of like being able to do it without thinking is kind of like how you enter into deeper meditation through it, right? In terms of like using the prayer example. And obviously it's like, someone who has actually like, memorize their multiplication tables as opposed to using a calculator their entire life. There's a way in which like the process of calculation is just more natural to them, which is going to have benefits down the road, even though the process of memorizing the multiplication tables is I don't think there are very many people that it's fun for, although there are probably some people who it is fun for.
I think there are people that the process is fun for, and then there's a certain joy in having it memorized.
Yeah,
that you miss out on if you rely on the calculator. Yeah,
right.
So let's play that out, Nate. I like that. So I think there's a good mix between memorization, what I liked. I think the things that were most valuable for me were when I did have to memorize. Like, you have to memorize cases and what the facts are and all this stuff where it would be, but I think for me, essay tests were the most challenging, yet the thing that I think brought the most out of me. The difference between just the bubble tests and I think you just kind of, I think, sparked in me, hey, Lance, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater for memorization. But I think there's something in trying to get teaching students to have to produce something. Because I think also, like, essay engages the creative mind a little bit more, because writing is that creative act, and learning how to write well is a synthesis of thought and critical thinking, because you're parsing through memorized things to then have to communicate something, which I think is a really critical skill.
That's why I say I learned more in debate than I did in any of my classes in high school. Because that's what I was doing. I mean, I'm having to do critical thinking all the time, and I wrote all of the cases for our team. Like I wrote affirmative and negative cases for our team, like, the entire time. So I got to do a lot of that. Maybe it was less good for some of my teammates. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I did.
Right.
And the other thing is, like, talking about memorization is, I did platform speaking events too. And like, I would have to memorize my speeches for platform events. And there's something to be said for memorizing things. And I did theater later, and I was prepared for that by the fact that I had to memorize speeches. So
I think memorizing things is very good for you. Memorizing poetry is great.
Yes, it is. Memorizing the Bible. there's something to be said for Protestant for the Protestant fixation on memorizing passages of scripture. It in some ways, like it incorporates it into your being. And once it's there and it's in you, it becomes more than that. Like I can still remember like things I've memorized. I can still remember like large chunks of, and they'll just come to me sometimes. Like I once did a dramatic interpretation of Umberto Eco has a short story called Letter to My Son. That's in one of his collections of short fiction. And I did a dramatic interpretation on it in a college competition. And I think I ended up getting second place. I would have gotten first place. I would have won, but I accidentally went overtime and missed my time cue. But because actually my ballots were like really good. And they said, they all said I would have won. So I'm not speculating. Like I would have won if I hadn't gone overtime. But I can still remember how that starts out. I can still remember the beginning of it. Dear Stefano, Christmas is marching upon us, and soon the big stores downtown will be packed with excited fathers acting out their annual scenario of hypocritical generosity. Like that's the buying for themselves, pretending it's for their sons, and so on. And the story is like it's a defense of him as a pacifist, justifying buying his son Marshall toys. And why he thinks it's a good thing. So,
well, I think one of the major problems is I don't know where because even in affluent schools where parents want their kids to have great education, so they'll invest in extra teachers and stuff like this. Very few parents are really engaged in their kids' education. And the one thing that's going to have to happen to make this change, because, I have, my sisters were teachers, and being a teacher is a hard job and a thankless job in a lot of ways. And so
it's an impossible job,
but like the parents are going to have to invest with their kids, but parents are just as, we can all raise our hands to some extent. And I've had at times in my life that I'll be, fully honest that I've been too engaged with my screen and not with my kids. If I look at what, as this burst onto the scene with me. But if I would look back now, trying to get parents to get off their screens and into their kids' lives that's a crisis we have going on right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we talk about the kids being on the screens more, but the parents being on the screens is maybe the bigger problem. Yeah.
The problem I had is like when I was working and my ex-wife traveled all the time and I had the kids there. By the time I worked a 60-hour week job, and then I'm coming in and I'm trying to, first off, you got to get them fed. Then they need a bath, and then you run around and then they have all this homework, and this is even in grade school. And most of it was just busy work, which drove me nuts. So now I'm doing their homework with them, but sometimes you have to do the homework for them in some ways, because it's 8:00 and it's time for them to get to bed.
Yeah.
And that begs the question, not to be sexist, or maybe a dad could stay at home or whatever, but when both parents are working, now add that into, now you got to do homework with your kids. We've just created
which
such
means
busy lives.
And okay, so let's think about this for a second. So we have both parents, like this is the norm in our society, that both parents are working and are stretched thin, and the teachers have classes that are overloaded. Who is left to discover the unique genius that every child has if someone is there to pay attention?
Who?
Well,
that's a sad question.
It has to be the parent. It has to be us. Like, it's our responsibility. We've got to raise that up.
Sometimes it miraculously happens with teachers, but it's not. The teacher isn't going to be able to find it with every child. There'll be the lucky child where perhaps the genius of the child and the genius of the teacher overlap to enough that like there's a shared passion and the teacher encourages it. Right.
Well,
and I'm using genius here is in the sense of like the unique gift.
Well, no, it is. I'll tell you, to be able to spot in a child that thing that is their thing, that's a genius trait. Here's what turned my whole life around in school. I used to get in trouble all the time because I would not do busy work. If I knew my times table, I would not do your times table thing. And it drove my teachers crazy. and I got bad. My grandma, great grandma, used to call them marks. I got bad marks because of it. Now I was good. I wouldn't be disrespectful. I wouldn't bother other kids or whatever, but I would not do your busy work. And it took the librarian in 3rd grade, and I was going into 4th grade. She goes, Lance, I think you're a really, really sharp young man. But I have a gifted program, but you have to get great grades. I would think that you would want to like win the test, because if you win the test and you get the top grade in the test, you can be in this gifted program. And what she saw was this little competitive kid running around trying to win everything at recess. And she realized she turned school into a game for me and a competition. And from that point forward, I was a 4+ student and never got anything but an A. Because she saw I need to get this kid lit up. And she got me lit up through my competitive spirit.
Yeah, I stayed hated. Like even I think I graduated high school with like a 3.57 or something like that, because I never got over that. Like, if you're giving me bullshit, I want to tell you it's bullshit. I got kicked out of classes for mouthing off to teachers for telling them that their assignments were bullshit.
If they
I used to kind of do that too, but I never got kicked out of class.
Laura, you seem too nice to do that. You didn't do that, did you?
I was, in high school though, I could be a little bit fierce because I loved debating and I loved arguing. I was more argumentative then than I am now. And frankly, the reason I'm not as argumentative now probably has something to do with the fact that I have hypothyroidism. So I'm not as energetic as I used to be.
No, that's interesting. I want to talk about love of argument, because we've got someone who's a former debater and a lawyer, and you just admitted that you liked argument. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
I want to talk about what is the healthy and the unhealthy aspect of that.
Yeah, there's a healthy aspect. Because there's a virtue in defending the truth and wanting to know what's true and accurate, or and what thing is better than another thing or whatever. There's this desire to kind of hammer things into the shape that they should be in, that can be good. Obviously it can go overboard. I think another thing that made me love arguing less actually was just the internet, right? Like all the experience of years and years of internet trolls and stupid arguments that don't go anywhere. I think that also kind of burned me out on arguing.
I loved it.
But it has its place for sure.
So much for most of my life. Really loved it. And I loved it to me, like I really saw it as a game.
Yeah.
From a very early age. It's like I recognized it as a game. And it's a game, but I figured out how to win very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I loved it. And I think, like, obviously it has its abuses, but I still think there's something good there. I would say what's interesting thing I would notice in myself is, like, I always had I never got to be an actual knight errant like I wanted to be when I was a little boy. But I always had this sense of when I saw someone who was really getting clobbered in an argument, like, whether I agree with what they were arguing for or not, if I thought that the people that were arguing against them were like operating in bad faith and not giving that person's position its due, I would just jump in on that person's side. Like, I did that one time when I was coaching debate for my old high school. This is when I was in college. I was helping with the debate team, and I went on a tournament to judge and to coach the team. And the other coach was a pastor, and the debaters were all a bunch of like materialist, agnostic, atheist types, as is kind of the norm. And they were just like really like beating him up and strawmanning him really badly in an argument about the existence of God. So it's like I couldn't help myself. I just jumped in on his side, and it's like, wait a minute here. And I was still an agnostic at the time, but after the fact, it's like I found myself reflecting on. I mean, it took a long time before I ended up becoming a person of faith after that, but I definitely ended up reflecting on some of the things that I had said during that exchange, and it's like, oh, there actually was some merit to some of the things I was saying. So even though they weren't my positions.
Yeah. By the way, Sherry is here. She should get on.
Oh yeah.
I'm not seeing it. Oh, she's in the chat. She's in the chat.
Sherry
okay.
and I.
Hey,
Sherry and I have never shared a screen.
I know. Maybe she could jump in here for just a second. Together. I know she's busy, but if you could just come in here and say hi. Yeah. She's got Christmas dinner going.
A co-founding member of Grail Country. No,
yes, along with Michael.
My parents always used to say that I came out of the womb arguing, and I did. And you say, so what is the benefit? I think it played out most, but in a lot of business, but it played out most in like the legal. Finally, when I counted my legal career, like I am really good, like you said, of crafting arguments, both sides. Like you give me like debate, like you give me because I'm going to win. So like you get, and any good lawyer better know what the best argument is over here. Like you better argue that sucker out to the nth degree to make sure you address it in your brief over here.
Yeah, you try to anticipate what the best arguments are going to be. Yeah,
so you can capture frame it how you want to frame it. But I would say, but here's how arguing. I would say my argumentative nature, I would say, has been more detrimental to me than helpful, because when I think about personal relationship, it is not good to be an arguer in personal relationship. Right. And if I look at my younger self, particularly whether it would have been with a spouse or those closest to me, I still argued. And for me, argument's fun and not personal. But as I've gotten through this kind of Jungian emotional intelligence, as I learned a lot of this, I trotted on a bunch of people's feelings.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And I was just wanting to argue, be right, and not to be mean or anything. It's just, I realized that interpersonally, that is not people. Like I love argument. Most people don't. Like they don't like conflict. They don't want to be in that. And if I could have learned that, as if I could go back to my younger self, that would probably be the one thing. One of my biggest strengths actually was the thing that caused me to cause more pain to other people than I wished I would have. And then the other thing I would say is that being raised in I'm a Midwest, Billy Graham was on NBC when I was a young man on Friday nights. I was an argumentative conversionist that's had zero fruit in my life. Zero, right. None. I can't point to one instance that I argued with someone, but what I can point to is being in a 12-step.
I can point to instances where I've got people to agree with me with that kind of technique, but not where it's made any lasting impact on somebody's life. Like I can remember, walking a Wiccan guy through St. Thomas's 5 Ways once, and having at the end of it, having him say, "Not only have you sufficiently demonstrated that God exists, you have sufficiently demonstrated that no other conception of God can exist than the one that you presented." Mm-hmm. So, but that didn't lead anything to. That doesn't mean anything to anyone's life. So the fact that he could have that, like intellectually, he could admit that it didn't have any impact. It doesn't bear any fruit.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
And I think argument's great. And I've been persuaded by argument and I see the value in it. But it's almost like I've learned for myself, Lance, you've lost the right to argue with people in your personal relationships because you don't know how to do it right. And until you get some way where because it is in my DNA.
Oh, yeah.
And I've really had to fight to shut my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Now that reminds me of another reason why I became less argumentative, which is that if you are female and you want a man to marry you, if you always have this posture of, oh, really? Prove it. Like, no, look at Paige and ID. If you're like that all the time, honestly, guys don't want to have anything to do with you. for the most part. Or what do you think?
I don't know. I would have probably liked that.
So I guess some guys will. I guess some
yeah,
will,
I think yeah. I
that's
understand
not what
a
lot of men are looking for in
that's very
in
true.
their female companions.
I think what you say is very true. I think it goes back, and I know people think these things are patriarchal, but I think there is something in the cherish and the adoration, that kind of terminology, what feeds truly men at a deep level, that kind of sort of thing, or and women back and forth. I think that is it. But that goes both ways too, right? Because, and I still fight this to this day, and I find myself doing it, like correcting my wife or not allowing her to finish something because I'm gonna stop you there because here's actually this right way to look at it.
Well, and also, let's face it, this is a big thing. Because you know where the argument is, you already know what the conclusion of the argument they're giving is. So it's like, and you can't stop yourself from like, okay, I know where exactly. That is the worst thing. People hate that so much, by the way, and it's so hard. It's so hard to stop yourself from doing it, especially when you know that you're right.
You mean when somebody's just giving you like a canned argument and you've heard it before, and you just want to save them the time of even stating it, so you're just like, no, it's stop there.
Or
like,
you just happen to know from the first premise of the argument what the conclusion has to be. I mean, so yeah, and people find that really irritating. The other downside of it is that it can turn you into a sophist. Right, yeah. Being really good at arguing can just turn you into a sophist, where it's just like,
sure.
You don't think it's just.
Well, and it's not even, for me, the worst parts is not even if it's an argument of ideas, but I know what you're going to try and convey because you're leading down a certain set of facts and you want to portray some way you feel, right? I know where that argument's going to land, Nate. Like I'm already like, yep. I know what you're going to say down here, and I'm going to stop it right here. And I am still, to be very honest, that's still some way that I'm very rude, and I'm trying to catch myself in that, because particularly if you think about your spouse or your closest relationships, they do not appreciate you cutting off. And I'll tell you, it is the hardest. That's the hardest character defect I have in personal relationships, is to not butt in and stop where that person's going. Because I want to stop it there and I want to get my side in.
Sometimes even if it's an agreement, where sometimes even if it's not in disagreement, and maybe actually sometimes even more if it's an agreement, where they drop something and you know immediately where it's headed, and then you're really excited about it, and it's like you finish their thought for them. They might have wanted to finish the thought themselves. Laura, I know I've done that to you, so I'm sorry.
Oh,
and Sherry,
I don't feel like you've done that to me, but I was just looking at what your mom said in the chat.
Guilty.
No, I don't think you've done that to me, because I remember somebody commented on one of our videos once saying that like you kept interrupting me, and I didn't feel like you were interrupting me. So
okay. Well,
yeah,
I do have that reputation
for interrupting women or interrupting everyone.
Interrupting women,
because this person complained that you interrupted women, and I was like,
interrupting women.
I interrupt everyone. I think it's equal
opportunity, but there are people who I think people know. Here's what I think: people notice it more. I think people's attention picks it up more easily when it's a man interrupting a woman.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any I don't think anyone has any. I don't think there are any nefarious motives all around. The people who notice it and are pointing it out, they're trying to, they're trying to be they're kind of being a little bit patronizing, because they're trying to jump to the defense of the women, right? So there's a slight patronization in their doing that.
That's slight.
They're being very honest with their own motivations, right? But despite that, I still think it's a good impulse, right? Especially, and I'm sure it's men that are making those comments. Although women might be doing it on defense of other women too.
Well, and I would say
it's so patronizing. I think it's probably mostly men that are making those comments. I have to go go back and look.
Yeah, frankly, if you did interrupt me, I'd just, after you were done saying what you wanted to say, I'd be like, okay, well, back to what I was saying, and I'd just get in what I wanted to say. Like, it's not that big a deal, right? Someone doesn't need to leave to my defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sherry
Well,
says you're not
also-
sexist, Nate.
Nate interrupts everyone.
Yes.
Confirmed from Sherry.
Yeah.
I do. I'm sorry. I am not sexist, she says.
Well, I do find, see, Laura, I mean, which you found in some ways, I bet you felt a bit like a unicorn with respect to other women at times. Like when you talk about how you like to argue and get in, because there are certain aspects. And I do think that once you get to this little corner of the internet, I think we find, I have, and this is kind of this Jungian typology stuff or whatever, and this is different than introvert extrovert stuff, is I do think that the women here that want to come and express and think about these ideas are much more willing to come in and say what they want to think. Now, they will, like Sherry will be nicer and not interrupt you, but she'll make sure that she'll say the point she wants to say when she wants to say it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Sherry's not anybody's doormat ever. No.
Exactly. I love that about her.
No. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I try to be nice, but I'm not a doormat by any stretch of the imagination.
Nope. Not at all.
No, I can just think around like Cassidy, yourself. I just think a lot of the women in our community, I love that about them, is they'll let some of us drone on and on and on that are the external processors. And once we, stop, then they'll come in and they're more than willing to share what they want to share.
Karen Wong will let you drone on and on and on and then ask you the most insightful question you've ever heard. She's such a good interviewer. I have to just give her props. She's such a good interviewer. She's really good at drawing the most out of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, asking people questions is now usually my alternative to arguing with people, right? Yeah. If I'm in a situation that could become really conflict heavy, usually I just ask people.
That's what Socrates did.
When Mormons come to see me, I just ask them a lot of questions also.
Yeah, that's a trait that, and Sherry has talked about this a lot, about trying to turn people on their heads, because I've spent a lot more time reading saints and things like that. What I'm trying to get better at is moving to, I know how to ask the question I want to ask in a cross-examination. Like I'm really good at, and not to try and be a cross-examiner, but instead of giving you the facts that I know and convincing you of them, asking the question to get you to answer your own question in that way. I'm trying to figure out how to take that skill I have in this one area and start pulling it out into this other area. Because one of the things in both Sherry and Luke would tell when I first came here is I was pontificating on a voice chat and it was driving them both crazy. And Sherry made this point, but what I am is I will listen. And if I was presented with new information, I'm open to it. I'm open to learning and I'm open to changing. And so that's one thing they didn't know about me. And they said something and I was open to it and I listened to it, internalized it, and did some of my own study, and then have gone from a conversionist, evangelical, charismatic to now I'm in the Orthodox Church, which is wild, right? But that's one of the things I need to start changing, is instead of trying to pontificate, to ask better questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I still do a little pontificating around my house, or maybe around my house it's a lot, but it's usually about language things, which everyone in the house can agree I know about. So then I'm just like, okay, everybody, here's a thing I want to say, and then I just go on and on.
You know what gets me? Yeah, the thing that irritates me most is when someone tries to tell me something about food.
Yeah, and then if you're a woman,
nothing gets me madder at my wife than when she tries to tell me how to cook something. And I know she's simply trying to tell me how a certain person likes it. Oh. And she knows that, and the reason she has to tell me is because she knows that I have in my head this is the right way to make it. And she has to convey the information, like I know that you have this in your head, that this is the right way to make this thing, but this person really likes it this way. So, and she knows that it's going to make me mad. So it's not really her fault. But
my response to that is always something along the lines of like, well, why is that person so picky? Yeah, they should just deal. But
well, usually my first thought is, you ain't never had it when I made it, so why don't you just eat it the way I make it and then tell me afterwards.
The cook's confidence. Oh, wait till he tries mine. He hasn't had jambalaya
100%.
until he's had mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I think this is a good time to wrap up this live stream. I still want to hang out with my son some today.
Oh, okay.
Since I have the day off. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us for this celebration. Wait a minute, unless mom, do you want to get in here and sing us a song?
Oh, that'd be so nice.
Yeah, I think that needs to happen. If you click up at the link at the top that I pinned, you can get into the live stream. I think that's a no.
Aw.
Some other time.
She comes on and sings a Christmas carol. I'll sing with her.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
all sing?
Yeah, maybe we can do that soon, though. I'll actually warn her.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure she probably wants to make
Well,
sure.
congratulations, Nate, and all the
Thank you very
Grail
much.
Country
Thank you
folks.
everyone for joining us. Laura, Lance, everybody in the chat, Sherry, Mom,
Hi, Sherry.
everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, congrats,
Bless
Nate. Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.